Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Rita Mae Reese, and I am one of the co-directors at Arts and Literature Laboratory. And I'm so delighted to be part of this reading tonight. We want to thank all of our donors for making the gift to make not only this reading possible, but all of our concerts, exhibitions, classes, and exhibitions possible, because we try to keep all of our events free or low cost. And so their generosity makes that not only that possible, but makes it possible to pay our bills and pay artists fairly for their work. So we're very grateful to the donors, even more grateful for members, because members say not only that they want to make the programs possible, but they want to be a part of all. They make a commitment to being part of all. And so that's really special to us. So I hope if you're not a member already, you'll consider becoming one, or even consider volunteering, because we have a lot of cool things that we do and we'd love to have you be part of it. I am particularly excited about tonight's reading because I love these three writers. They are all so incredibly talented, as you're about to witness, but each one of them is also deeply committed to creating community and supporting community in really special ways. So we think this is just a great way to start off the year. Our first reader, T.S. Banks, was actually one of the first poets featured at all. And for reasons that will become clear if they aren't to you already, you'll see why we invite him back every chance we get. T's an amazing poet, performer, and teacher, and is also founder of Loud and Unchained Theater, community activist, does amazing things, and has a brand new chapbook out called Split that you can find on his website. So without further ado, I'm going to get out of the way and let you witness T.S. Banks.
Hi, everyone. I'm T. My pronouns are he, him, his. Thank you so much to Art and Literature Lab and Watershed for having me to read tonight. So this evening, I'll be reading a few poems from my second chapbook called Left, and a little taste of Split, which is coming out this May. You can pre-order and find the rest of my chapbooks on my website at lutheaterco.com. So Left, this little tiny chapbook Left, is broken up into 3 poems answering 3 questions: what I left, what went left, and why I left. Situations, relationships, jobs, and beliefs. So without further ado, let's get into this. Here's to leaving things that no longer serve us. Left. I left 2017. Some things are still gathered at my throat. Over and over, I tell them you cannot keep me here, to snitch, to record. Although you called my bluff, told me that this would happen, told me we don't have to get rid of you. One day you will just leave. Again, they ask me for more, to sacrifice my body and become an amplifier, but no Bible verses have come through my lips for a while, more like prayers and eulogies barraging me at night and morning. Why smile when I become the alarm? Soften my face, for what? The second poem I'm about to read is called What I Left. And actually, what I left was myself. Laughter rinses my linens, my covers giggling, telling me how long I slept in a situation. 3 months, 2 years, every time my covers get washed, throw away my pillows. I have a habit of always throwing things away, clothes that don't fit, inches on my head, phone numbers and evidence one by one fading, justifying, you know what I did, right? You know, I wouldn't blame you if you left me too, fading, but some stains stuck, trying to rub alcohol into those clothes still don't work. I have thrown away myself a few times, once in rebellion, another when I was ready to rest. Each return, she says that I am different, with residue from the last place that I left me. Thank you. So this next part of left is where things just went left, okay? And one of the things that went left was Badger care. Badger care. White people want us dead. The way that they write us dead, quick to pronounce the time of death, tear out our tissue, examine us without consent, write out the toxicology report and contribute to the CDC statistics on Black bodies, having coffee, laughing, asking people why they still dying from lung cancer, asking why they not picking apples from their own backyards to eat. Sometimes I want to hold them doctors, medical charts, prescribe them racist, a murderer, a criminal, randomly drug test them, have their practices taken away, pay out all of them damn reparations. No regard for the danger that they put us in. Calling the police when there's therapists that share the same building as you. Shame. Is blood from all of these Black bodies tinting your cheeks red? Another thing that goes left is comparison. You always complaining. Shade from a friend, fed up from the cancellation. Fibro too, and they still show up for me. Ain't no clocks that I'm punching, you see? But I take 6 stabs a day, training my body to accept pain as pleasure. I didn't cause any of this to happen to me. Robitussin stained tablespoons, dirty electrodes, pills stuck to my left sock, marked spots on my furniture. I still live here in this body, maturing. And I'm not okay with it most days. Bloody glucose test strips, menstrual stains on my shorts, 3 walkers, 3 canes, Walgreens crutches, and my wheelchair. Pain has the ability to make everything audible. Laughs from children in the parking lot is still pissing me off. The clang of washed dishes distressing me. Looks like somebody tried to clean up but gave up. Throwing dinner parties to stop. My friends called me old. The excuses have gotten tired. A handful of spoons and I hold too much. I forget to ask my friends how they're doing too, while I tend to another symptom and both of us aren't right. A handful of spoons, I hold too much. Sitting across from each other at my friend's birthday party. This bitter cake batter seemed that we both showed up today. I hate having to apologize for better days or promise to be around more. We both know I don't keep my promises. Thank you. So another thing that I feel like always goes left is staying in that mode of self-reflection to the point where it becomes hypervigilance, to the point where it becomes very harmful to yourself. So this one is what I left, which is hypervigilance. I can only see 2 sides of the things, cliches, good or bad, whichever 2 sides of the stories collide. These 2 people sharing the same space, hearts to heart, argue down bed sheets, intruders overheard a lover's quarrel. 2 cents later, I can't unhear our argument. 2 people in a room, 2 more ears heard, a lot of stories about you, and it's just pure ego. My side of the story is unfinished, a bag of giggles. I'm not joking, this is anxiety. After the argument, my chin is to chest, self-reflection at my desk, frozen. Nervous tick, left thumb flicking through feeds for more than 3 minutes, stone stare in the middle of my boss's presentation. Everyone can see how I can't pay attention. He always on that damn phone, can't never see outside of himself. I will hear about this later. Fighting match between power and ableism, coach persuading the team that one liability won't keep their checks small. I only see 2 sides of this situation and equation. 1, I always fuck up, or 2, I don't deserve this space. Now, this last part of the book is why I left. I left because I was stuck in hypervigilance and that negative deprecation. I was stuck in situations that just were no longer healthy for me. So why I left. Why I left. Liberation has to be accountable. And so who you answering to? Oh, it doesn't matter? Oh, okay. Bro code and performing control. You filled up the whole room with your charm and your voice. It all clung to the walls. You knew the abuser and you became one. Accountable to who? You? I left really because no one I came with was here. For the record, I left because no one I came here with was here. I left. Why I left? Well, I left the call outs. After the call out, when they melt, a broken bank of secrets picked apart, dice rolled out for the lot of her tears, a pocket of her courage shown how to tame itself. I became magic, able to make myself small, codependent on harm's validation. Today, I am her favorite, a young dog learning new tricks, a bulldog showing my bite, letting my spit show. But I really don't want to bite you. Why I left meetings and deadlines. Well, I was manic. I choked. Shirt stuck to my chest, smoke against my lungs, I recline, watch the rolling credits, I produce this on my mixing boards, adjusting the levels of gabapentin, turning up Mary on the vocals. When pain shoots down my neck through my hip and my back, I request another track and the melody finds me. The drum kicks my pelvic stand, my back cracking in place of the black keys, my hands keeping time and forcing the band to change key on repeat. I forget to add the salt. Come home with donuts and watch the band think that I'm showing out. Crank up the sugar on the playback. I just need something sweet. How tart these pain flares have been. So many corners of my body hurt, I forget not just one joint or toes or one knee or both hips or both eyes or one migraine teasing me from sleep for 3 days, an album begging to be finished. And the musicians are aware that I can't keep time and the playback sounds all the same and the playback sounds all the same. Why I left expectations. Stranded, but I held the banner. You left my wheelchair handles calling out for you, but I never broke formation. Another body like mine left outside the crosswalk, unarmed dark, surrounded by badges and guns. Safety plans exist to protect able bodies only, able to bend and become any element quickly, ones able to swallow the late nights and blurred mornings, mixed signals, soldier, friend, client. Don't forget to study who can cross at the intersection, red light blinking, eventually we shift how we see each other. This is not a critique on the mission, no. The implementation was just flawed. And this last poem that I'm reading from left before I get into split is Why I Left My Idols. Why I left my idols. At therapy, she broke me open, wide open. My heart in her palm, I see wounded with placards of the faces of people who did it. Facial recognition, we both look in awe. I can recount the break, She found others on the surface that my eyes could not see, each face landing on the carpet between my couch and her chair, her hands pointed to the culprit, sobbing. I screamed at each face, scratching a hard surface till my knuckles and fingertips become raw. Some were idols that I worshiped with blind loyalty until she blew the whistle. At therapy, broken wide open, at the revelation that the idols that I built could be toppled down and hurt me anyway. Something in me must be doubting God to be building altars of him out of flesh. I trembled at what this could mean. Did I do this to my own heart? Self-deprecation showed its ugly head again. All that self-doubt projecting on everyone. Even if I was hurt, I should have seen myself sooner. I hear her voice saying that our session is ending. Sitting at the couch, trying to blend into the rubble I just created, I gather myself, pretend that I have exhaled. Therapy still ain't revealed nothing new. That losing the image is the hardest part. I put flowers there over the cracks, geraniums to grow truth in my gardens, ginger and turmeric to take the inflammation down. Tending to this garden makes a difference, that I can grow things, me, and mend me back together. So those were a few poems from Left, my second chapbook, and I'm about to give you all a taste real quick of Split. Well, I got a few minutes left. If you are interested and love what you heard, please find me utheaterco.com, and you can find my books there and book me and see what I've been up to. All right, so this first poem is called Split, its namesake. Split. 1. When I have swept into a current, apathetic of water filling my lungs, and my legs and arms cannot deliver me to the surface, my only available thing for survival is spirituality, and my most sacred practice is sleep. Able to trust my body and God to react when my strength and awareness is cut. True faith appears when something else controls me. When I split, there is a shedding. I used to feel bad when my mind was split, that it would let go and shed itself of the present. I once held a smile for 18 months, every morning, literally practicing how to hold my cheeks, how wide to open my eyes, how high to raise my eyebrows, and how to sound confident in me. 2. Between me and me, feel it coming in the morning, just when my eyes have grabbed that glimmer between the shades, something ugly peeled apart by reason, unreason with me, twist me. When I feel the split coming, I sit up in my bed, rewatching reruns within the hospital, buy popsicles and bite straight into the cold, reach for my blankets. You don't understand what happens to me. The feeling in my right hemisphere of my skull start to tingle, speaking in sentences with still lips, becoming a ball of nervous laughter. To me, I am communicating. When I split and the taps hit at the foot of my bed, I choose my words carefully, but still I can't describe the feeling in my right hemisphere itching, trying to regulate my mood, capture the trigger and tame my mind to see the full picture. I hate when the peeling starts. My new skin slippery and slimy. Trauma compels me to over-prepare, or trauma eventually shifts me. So next poem from Split is called Head Sick. The dead name calls to me in the hallways like they did that one summer on campus for a scholarship that forgot my name anyway. Do I call myself back to that home? Renaming is part of the dead. At times, I am carrying around the dead. Dead name was beautiful, and now when I am getting ill, I hear them taunting me in the hallways like the first time I got head sick. When I told the minister this story, she recited scriptures recalling my birth gender, giving me the correction prayer that forced renaming made me head sick the longest. Prayer Weaver told the only holy people how head sick I was, and they poured sane water on my sick head. Baptismal pools still haunt me. I dreamt the water dried up when they dipped my head under. My baptismal robe soaked like the scarlet letter. No one taught me how to dress for the saint pool. My dead name shouted at me like a prayer, and now I feel it on the heart side, like a bruised chest when you take a hard tackle, like a self-portrait of my dead name. And this last poem that I'm about to read to y'all before I head out is called Daydreaming. It's from Split. Again, Split will be out this May 2022. You can find me at lnutheaterco.com. I'm T.S. Banks. Daydreaming. Most of the time, I wonder if I am daydreaming, looking at my body from the outside, but they do not move me. Retracing convos from earlier, did he smile right, hair right? Is my clothes right? Did I speak right? Did I hear right? Am I walking right? Did I see right? Am I obeying right? An undead ghost studying me. I don't have to be perfect, just perfect enough to blend in. I was aware that I was different early. I still get embarrassed when people remind me that I had drifted. I wonder how long that I waited there, how long that they let me struggle in the water before they pulled me out. That eerie feeling, you know, when everyone around you knows something about you, but you. Yeah, I knew I was different, and it used to make me sad to watch myself get stuck outside my body. I hate daydreaming in the middle of conversations. People will think it's rude. People think it's self-centered. I don't like to admit that I have disordered thoughts. I think people will use it against me. They will trust me less, say that I am not fit to be a caregiver. People will agree my thoughts are disordered and write them off as untrue. Instead of my truth just being told in a disorganized sequence, people will claim that my disorganization is a liability. Lately, those symptoms have been so clear, punishing myself when I remember that I got lost in the middle of a presentation. I stopped taking interviews over a year ago when they split my mind open. I never quite healed. The last time my brain split, it took me 2.5 years to have that buzzing leave my brain, to feel as if I was present instead of witnessing my life. It's the split in which I write this, a fracture, processing trauma, and yet slower now, deliberate, tender. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, T. That was a wonderful reading. It's so great to have you back, and I'm excited for the book in May. Woo! Congratulations. I'm also very excited to introduce Barrett Swanson. Barrett is one of the best chroniclers of belonging and its absence in any genre in America right now, so you are in for a treat. I first discovered his writing in a pushcart anthology. If you're unfamiliar with the pushcart anthology, it's a collection of the best writing in any genre from a previous year, nominated by editors and other writers. So big deal to get nominated, big deal to get in, but more amazing, it was like the best story in that year. So, woo, Barrett was amazing. So I was teaching a class and I was like, I don't know who this Barrett Swanson guy is, but that's an amazing story. So I'm going to ask him to come and talk to my students. And I was like, he's probably going to be like snooty and be like, oh, well, if you pay me $300, I will bestow my wisdom on them. But no, he like, sure, tell me what time, showed up. My students adored him, of course. So fantastic teacher, chronicler, essayist, has a great new book out, Lost in Summerland. Be sure to check it out. And now you get to hear him read. So welcome, Barrett.
Thank you so much, Rita Mae. And thanks to ALL and these two poets whom I'm incredibly honored to be reading with tonight. So I'm going to read an essay called About a Girl. The Wisconsin State Fair, renowned for its cheese curds and cream puffs, takes place every August on the outskirts of Milwaukee, which is the worst point humidity-wise during the course of a Midwestern summer. I can't tell you why exactly I've decided to come to the fair. I suppose that my previous misadventures with summertime untethering, water parks, rodeos, had failed so spectacularly that I thought it might be a surefire expedient to down-home relaxation. Yet I confess I've grown weary of the impulse to analyze these dog day amusements. Who am I to scrutinize these rambling pastimes? Who am I to point and sneer? So I'm going to refrain from the requisite descriptions of folksy activities. I'm not going to spend time on the sizzling pig races or the amateur bench press competition, nor will I profile the bald, happy-faced illusionist who, during his mid-afternoon set, made a child's baseball hat disappear. I'm not going to talk about the stunt dog exhibitions, nor the cows I met who had lustful names, Delilah, Tangeray, nor will I offer impressive sounding meditations on Ferris wheels or funnel cakes. Instead, what I want to talk about is the moment late in the afternoon, while wandering past the food stands, when I heard over the sizzle of the grills a faint melody, Gershwin, Rodgers and Hammerstein maybe, and against my better judgment, I found myself making my way closer and closer to the music. I eventually arrived at a fully packed auditorium, and on stage, how to describe them? A phalanx of dancing teens singing in flawless four-part harmony. Was I approaching the first row and sitting down in front of them? I was. Did I feel the roil of jealousy in my gut, the after effect of some long-buried misfortune? I did. The sign in front of the bandstand read, "Kids from Wisconsin." When I was 12 years old, I auditioned for and was accepted into a professional singing and dancing group called A Company of Kids, a gifted ensemble of 12 to 18-year-olds who traveled across the byways of Wisconsin, delighting crowds with our hydraulic smiles and our over-enthused jazz hands. We did Grease and Little Shop of Horrors and songs from Les Mis. We even did selections from Rent, although it still baffles me that none of our parents batted an eye when the preteen members of our group sang in angelic harmonies about AZT breaks. If you lived in or around Milwaukee in the run-up to the millennium, it's possible you saw us. Owing to our garish costumes, we were kind of a hard act to miss. Our standard summertime raiment was black slacks and chartreuse dress shirts, all of it overlaid with purple or teal vests, plus a pair of jazz shoes or tap shoes, depending upon each child's talents. Think Glee, think Fame, think Sister Act 2. It was my brother who recruited me. Naturally, one wants to blame these things on the family. Throughout high school, he'd been a highly accomplished actor and vocalist, and in the fall of his freshman year, he'd heard about this group called A-OK, which apparently had a history of producing Broadway talent. They were electric, these kids, when they performed. I remember when I first saw my brother on stage at their annual winter gala event. And bedecked in era-appropriate costumes, he and about 24 other boys were singing Boudoir from Miss Saigon, their honeyed, mellifluous voices wholly out of keeping with their pimple-flecked miens. Who can say how these things happen exactly? But I remember sitting in the audience with my parents. When the boys sang, "They are the living reminder of all the good we failed to do," I felt the floor drop out beneath me. That I wanted to audition came as a surprise to both me and my parents. Up until that point, I had harbored boring heteronormative aspirations to be a professional football player. And as a white kid from the suburbs, I tended to hang out with ball-capped boys who wore polos and watched Adam Sandler movies. We called ourselves the Sexy Six, and even though we were only in middle school, insisted upon wearing the designer imposter version of Aqua di Gio cologne. It was just awful. There were two kinds of performers among us. Those who actually had preternatural talent and could maybe make a legitimate run for Broadway, and those who were simply good child performers. I fell into the latter category. Because I was only 12, my voice hadn't yet ripened, so its timbre tended to waver awkwardly between notes. The group's directors, they were kind to me about this. Whereas the other boys were given solos that showcased their glass, clear tenors or their mannish baritones, I got a lot of talking parts and one season of rap solo, specifically Pump Up the Jam, the famous Jock Jams anthem, which I performed while wearing copious MC Hammer pants and a pair of yellow tinted sunglasses. Sometimes when my family and I are debating politics at Thanksgiving, and I start getting a little haughty with my English professor locutions, my older brother will bring me back down to size by humming the melody of this number, occasionally miming a few of the appalling dance moves I had hazarded on stage at the time. We were never not performing. I don't mean that in a winking, postmodern, Irving Goffmanish sort of way. I mean that since our chosen pastime was fundamentally histrionic, even when we weren't officially on stage, there was always at least someone play acting. Our group parties, which usually took place around fire pits in our parents' backyards, tended to consist of small bands within our troupe doing concerts, shows, we called them, for the rest of us. Some of the older guys were in a group that regrettably only played Pearl Jam covers. Another girl, who eventually became a collegiate gymnast, would occasionally impress us with round-offs and backflips. Every August, there was a banquet to celebrate the end of the season, where the directors would give out awards for superlative achievement. Think of it as our version of the Grammys. One year, my brother got Best Male Solo. Another 12-year-old named Tim, a tall boy with a mop of brown curls, received the Rising Star Award. He's now on Broadway in the cast of The Greatest Showman. Almost every year, I could be counted on to receive the distinction for Best Stage Presence, which in hindsight, I am tempted to read as a back-patting consolation. After all, within the AOK culture, all stage presence meant which was using one's gestures to communicate pep and enthusiasm, regardless of the song. I suppose at this point, I can no longer avoid admitting that I was the type of 12-year-old who, while singing on stage, would lock eyes with an older lady in the audience, and without the slightest twinge of self-consciousness, would wink at her like an old crooner. Someone who frequently took the distaff version of this award was one of my best friends in the group, a person named Mandy. Mandy liked to wear Jinko jeans and Nirvana t-shirts whenever she wasn't performing, and people frequently told her that she should model, that she should act. With the other kids, I was usually sensitive enough to perceive when they were feigning dolefulness or sophistication. I'm so depressed, one might say, as we put on makeup before a performance. But the thing about Mandy was that I could never be sure what was real and what was a put on. Once, on a bus ride to a group retreat in the woods, she suggested that we become blood siblings, and with the restive quirks of a sparrow, began rummaging through her purse. Eventually, she extracted a glinting Swiss Army knife. The parent chaperones were distracted up front, unacquainted with and thus unprepared for children of such morose temperament. And by that point, most of the other kids in our row had either fallen asleep or were gazing moodily out the window, their ears buzzing with the solipsism of their Walkman. Our wounds were small and delicately made, and I was surprised by the volume of blood each of us could produce. We mashed our fingers together until the tips whitened and lost feeling. And when we finally unglued them, Mandy smiled at me in a cozen, knowing way and licked away the blood that was squirming down her palm. That she toggled holographically between these states of being, from one angle she was being serious, from another sardonic, was what I think made her such an uncanny performer. She could remove herself from the very scenario of the theater and become a fleeting container for whatever sentiments the moment required. An hour passed like that, maybe more, with me sitting there in utter bafflement until the bus finally exited into the Wisconsin woods, my scalp prickling brightly, my heart walloping in my chest. The earliest known usage of the word presence, as outlined in the OED, is associated with the Christian idea of the Eucharist, the supposedly consoling notion that the Spirit of God resides nearby, even when he himself is not there. It is a haunting, in other words, this presence, shapeless and without discernment. And it's this connotation that fits most readily with the kind of stage presence I'm trying to describe. Those electric pulsing moments when an actor or singer on stage becomes not a product of rehearsal and training, not a bearer of individual talent, but instead assumes the properties of a medium of some kind, a channeler for other spirits. In certain artists, you can almost perceive that little click of disappearance, the moment when something changes in their eyes, when they've left the crude materiality of the stage and have gone off to some other realm. Go and watch a YouTube clip of Nirvana playing Where Did You Sleep Last Night on MTV's Unplugged, and pay close attention to the last time they do the chorus. At this point in the song, Kurt has shrugged off his sleepy, gravelly tenor, and what has arrived in its place is a wonderful melodic shrieking, that tuneful, water-pierced scream. In no way does this sound seem to be issuing from a male voice. To me, it is the sound of a prairie woman reprimanding her wayward daughter. But this is nothing compared to what happens next. Throughout the song, Kurt's eyes have been cast pensively downward or pinched into soulful little asterisks, and remain so as he sings, my girl, where will you go? I'm going where the cold wind blows. In the pines where the sun don't ever shine, I'd shiver the whole. Then he pauses, just a tiny half second of a pause, just long enough for you to wonder whether something has gone wrong. Maybe a glitch in the video feed or a hiccup with the stage's amperage. But soon Kurt opens his eyes, and whatever else you might think about his visage at this moment, his greasy blonde tresses, the geriatric sweater, the emergent beard, is no longer performing for an audience. We are now apprehending the eyes of a man who is looking out onto a world that simply isn't there. Not a world of cameras and headsetted producers and onlookers in their seats, but a world he alone has taken us to, almost close enough to touch. I could get there sometimes, in other words, even as a boy, could reach that plane of disappearance. Mostly it was accidental. I'd be standing on stage singing the Phantom of the Opera or whatever, and something inside of me would come unhinged. A self-forgetting would occur. But in the next instant, another song would start up and I'd be back to my snapping and toe taps, my little vaudeville of winks and grins. Mandy, though, was something else. She seemed always in control of the occasion of her disappearance. She came to Jesus that retreat weekend. I don't mean that metaphorically. A few of the girls in our group were stalwartly evangelical and were not exactly shy about their fervor for the Lord. At some point that first night, two of the Christian girls came out of the bunkhouse to make a special announcement. Okay, one said, I know we're all here to prep for the winter gala, but you guys, something really special has happened here tonight. They were standing in the door jam, blocking any view of the interior, and a crowd of us had gathered round, ever willing to serve as an audience. With child actor panache, the girls then parted ways in perfect synchronization. And then the gaps their bodies made, Mandy less walked than floated out of the room. It was bizarre. It was like they had rehearsed it. Mandy's face was swollen and red, and I remember the pearlescent edge of a single tear was still clinging to her eyelashes. She was fidgeting with the cuff of her sweater as the girl said, you guys, I'm happy to announce that Mandy has just accepted Jesus Christ into her life. What commenced was a round of hooting and applause, and as the other cast members hugged and congratulated her, Mandy glanced over at me and smiled, somewhat wearily, perhaps even conspiratorially. Then I'll never forget, she shrugged. How could I help reading this as a tacit acknowledgement of deception, that on some level she was simply playing games with us? A grumpy adolescent streak ran in her temper, I knew. And maybe this was a Holden Caulfield fuck the phonies type protest. It was as if she were mocking our attempt at authenticity, as if to say, you think you're not always on stage? You want to call me a fraud? She killed herself a few years later, still a girl, sitting on the floor of her childhood bedroom, with her father's gun shimmering near her temple, and her mother fixing supper only 2 rooms away. Some weeks afterward, my brother granted it was probably best for the best that I did not attend the funeral. I was still in middle school at the time and didn't exactly have the neural wherewithal to process that sort of thing. Did he say there were hundreds of long tallow candles arranged around the altar? Or is that just how I've imagined it? Our fellow cast members, they didn't know how to act. Some had assumed the world weariness of faux adulthood, while others could do nothing but become loudly unglued. Several of the girls were shrieking as they wept. Toward the end of the service, a contingent from AOK approached the coffin, and after a moment of silence, one bold girl with wheat-colored hair, who later made a name for herself on Broadway, began humming In the Arms of the Angels, a song by Sarah McLachlan. The way my brother tells it, the girl then started belting the lyrics in a plush, flawless soprano, and about halfway through the first chorus, the other kids joined in, layering the harmony, threading their arms around each other as they coalesced around the coffin. For what it's worth, and for reasons I can't rightly defend, I think Mandy would have hated this. I think she would have mocked their attempts to sacralize their sadness, to prettify it with a song. I've spent a lot of time in the intervening 2 decades trying to understand the logic of her act, the logic of any suicide, really. And what I am tempted to conclude is that hers was an effort to pull back the hard rind of her mask, to reveal the mayhem and shattered sadness that lurked beneath. Children in particular are so often made to put on a brave face, to play act competence in moments of senselessness, to pretend that they're better off than they are. And I think hers was an act performed to mark the end of performativity. For those AOK kids to sing about angels and white robes and heavenly thermals was to insist upon performance, and she had had enough of that. It's not like I could have given voice to any of these concerns at the time. Still, they manifested in ways that were oblique but no less shameful. I started lying to my parents all the time. And sometimes I jabbed the bottoms of my feet with freshly sharpened pencils, a mutilation any therapist would tell you was a clear sign of survivor's guilt. But the telltale came when I decided to leave the group for good, soon after our performance at the Wisconsin State Fair. We had already finished our set, and a group of us were walking around the fairgrounds, eating corn dogs and talking about the upcoming school year. That's when we saw them, performing at one of the main stages in front of a packed audience, our arch rivals, the kids from Wisconsin. There'd been a scheduling mix-up apparently, and the booking agents must have slotted both of our groups for the same day. Watching them, my friends began snickering disdainfully, the way you do when you know your competition is your obvious superior. But I couldn't muster the effort. What I felt instead was a sickening lurch in my stomach, the sort of existential queasiness you're apt to feel when you cross paths with your inner Jekyll, your Janus twin. As I watched these kids smile and dance on stage, enunciating the lyrics with the practiced crispness, I was able to recognize, perhaps for the first time, the falseness of my own performance. A couple days later, I gave my parents the news. Given all that had happened that year, they assured me the directors would understand. For a long time afterward, I wasn't willing to admit how much I cared about Mandy. Perhaps because she was a few years older than me, she usually treated my affections as cute little brother offerings, an interpretation that promptly dismantled any romantic tension in our relationship, however one-sided it may have been. But I came to love her in my own small way. And isn't there something to be said for the fact that I've mentioned her in every meaningful relationship I've ever had? Why can't I go a week without wondering what she thought of me, without wondering what she might have made of the person I've become? As the kids from Wisconsin settled into their final number last summer, a group of EMTs were carrying away a body. An elderly person had had a heat stroke in the bleachers, and now a posse of uniformed men were rolling her away on a stretcher. On stage, the children didn't miss a beat. They were in the midst of a medley called From Now On, and one girl with feathered bangs was delivering a bone-jostling solo, one whose otherworldly contralto, I confess, had set my hair on end. Then she arrived, as she does sometimes, at moments when I'm at my most performative. I'll be reading at a bookstore or lecturing in front of my students, and I'll begin to perceive the slightest tilt in the room's atmospherics, which is how I know Mandy is there. It happened just before the kids from Wisconsin finished their set, just before I made an anguished beeline for the exits. The auditorium had erupted with applause, like the roar of a Roman Colosseum, and the kids were taking their bows, and I felt on the wings of the stage the presence of a girl, 16 or 17 maybe, with brown iron curls and starkly painted lips. She was glancing nervously at the audience, her face empty of affect, as though she were waiting for some on-stage cue to make her final entrance. I kept hoping she might catch my gaze in the audience, maybe offer a little wave of recognition. But by the time I came to my senses, the crowd was filing out of the bleachers. The children had left the stage, and I was left here as I have ever been to make sense of her disappearance. Thanks a whole lot.
Thank you, Barrett. That was a stunning essay. Yeah, I highly suggest you all go get Lost in Summerland. Yeah, look for his work, which regularly appears in Harper's and other amazing places. So thank you, Barrett. Our last reader tonight is Idiola Jones, or I.S. Jones. She's a queer American Nigerian poet, also the Hoffman Hall's Emerging Artist Fellow at UW-Madison. But I know her better in series. In that role, she's been delighting in bringing poets together from all over the world. And her energy and grace have just been such a gift to everyone on the literary arts team at all. So we've been so grateful to have her leading the reading series and just being a great part of our community. She just published this chapbook, Spells My Name, which has generated a lot of admiration and excitement from all different corners of the poetry world. And it's a stunning book, beautifully stitched. Definitely want to find that by Newfound Press. And it's just got a lot of gorgeous poems in it. And one of the lines that really stuck out to me is because we want something more beautiful than us to choose us. And I feel like Idiola does wonderful choosing and makes everyone feel that specialness that we all have such a hunger for. So please join me in welcoming Idiola Jones.
Rita Mae, thank you so much. I'll actually read that poem too. I wanted to start off with some poems from the full-length collection that I am writing. Is hard, y'all. I don't know. I'm doing my best though. These papers behind me are my full-length that I am near complete with. What's interesting about writing a book, and I'm sure all of you know this, is that you kind of get to a point where you have an idea of what it looks like, but there might still be holes that you have to write into for the narrative to feel complete and robust. So that's kind of the corner I've turned now with the book. I'm going to read 3 poems from the full length. This one just got picked up by Marcus Wicker, author of Silencer, for the South Indiana Review. The Terrible Feast of Love, Etymology of Abel. Oh yeah, the only thing I'll say is that my poems reimagine Cain and Abel as sisters. I won't really explain much beyond that. Yeah. The Terrible Feast of Love, Etymology of Abel. Here's a truth about the world and the people who live in it. No one wants to touch the dead body, yet everyone waits to consume its flesh. It's a story I know now by heart. A girl goes into the forest and returns a woman against her will. Her dress torn, hands anointed in blood, soil and tears veil her face. In this house, war solves only one problem, the desire to wage war. Surrendering to the body's feral instructions, my family carves up my pet goat, Ife. Ife, Yoruba meaning love. Imagine that, eating love. My family eating my love. They sit upright at the dinner table, clinking silverware, love filling their mouths. The line between beast and human is a fallacy of conquest. It's all the same war, animals devouring animals. Maybe I should be grateful it's not me at the table center, on all fours, stuffed with sweet peppers, garlic, and sage. My name noble as the wind, and like the wind I am invisible. They delight in my labor and not a single thank you. Ife and I, we are the same. Creatures no one wants. Adam's one silver tooth tears into the meat of love. When he sees I refuse food, we stare at each other. We carry two narratives. In one, he is a good father teaching me my place in the world, to beat me into softness as if to say, I'll teach you to love me. In another, he walks with the arrogance of a king, but no wealth. Give people freedom and they invent better cruelties. Give a girl child an axe and she comes to understand beheadings can be pleasure too. I am the axe dreaming my way through Adam's throat. The blade and neck have a long relationship of lust. Some mornings I would sit on the bathtub's lid watching Adam shave his neck, silver trowel over the dark earth. The axe is only a weapon when knowledge is fully formed. My name meaning threshold, ephemeral, vain glory. I am the space between resistance and flight. The axe drags its one fang across the sun's face before diving back to earth. One beast becomes two. No one knows I can't wound a creature without turning the knife on myself. The pleasure of it so overwhelming, the river in me split in two. Tomorrow is my birthday, and my best friend is dead. Like the other animals, I couldn't have become anything but this. Pulp Adam sucks between his teeth. This poem is published in the latest issue of Transition Magazine, which the only thing I'll say is that Transition Magazine is one of the oldest African originally based magazines that's now owned by Harvard University. Eve onto Lilith. When he touches me, it is you I feel, sister. When he catches my reflection in the river, I see your face. Gold wing warblers open the morning with their trill, and I know it is your laugh. When the wind lifts my dress just so, I know it is your breath. I spend my days looking for you. Your blood sings to me from everywhere. I ask Adam if he had a lover before me. He calls me hysterical, slaps me so hard blood, then more blood fills my mouth, ruptures in my eye. I wail and hit him back. He breaks heaven over my skull and the world goes dark. Sister, it goes on like this. At night, he fucks me so hard I bleed. He moans, repent, repent, repent until he comes. He won't look at me now. Says my greedy mouth is the collapse of paradise. Some animals show mercy by taming the wild out of their lovers. I laugh at his rage. I laugh at my loneliness. In the agreement of flesh, he keeps me small. I keep him purposeful. God tells us once the miracle comes, we have to leave Eden. He doesn't explain what miracle means, but says punishment means deliverance. Sister, I'm scared. I don't understand what's growing inside me. Days uncount themselves, my body gorged and overripe. God tells me this is my gift instead of death, that I would create life the only way a human can. I never flinched before a man, and I don't intend to start now. Your body is a spell I summon from dust. Lilith, deliver me. And I'll read one more poem from the full length before I read some poems from the chapbook. This is another poem that Marcus Wicker also picked up for publication. We are soft between hours. The only thing I'll say about this poem is that this is a poem about young girls masturbating, which I'm really fascinated with how young girls discover pleasure outside of a traditional male gaze, especially with the way that women in the Bible are often rendered. We are soft between hours. There's a sweetness to these nights of surrender. It's true. The heart beats two rhythms, one for me, then you. I emerge from the shower, drip on mama's good floor, trail a gallon of water towards your door. Down the hall you stretch in your skin, I saunter in mine. I tried before to rest, but my jaw aches from grinding teeth, so I kneel at your altar. I watch you touch yourself through a blade of light leaking into the hallway. Earlier, we went to the river if only to relieve the body of the sun's tirade. I didn't mean to see it first. You slip out of your blue bathing suit, step into the water, blue promise memorizing the muscles of your back. I'm old enough to understand how too much longing can make any creature feral. My problem is that I fall in love with beauty. You are the grape going into my mouth, the lone tear of river water tracing my breast. I've spent my small life as two bodies yearning to be one. I want to know how it felt the first time you discovered God's eye blooming between your legs, a flowering of dark red poppies in a field. What pleasure possesses you, sister, I want for myself. In this night, everything is about the moon, even her absence, even you. Eventually, someone wants something. That's the nature of power. Oh, patient light, grant me passage. I want no beast but the night to hear me. Your soft, indelible labor, fingers roving the field until you shudder into a gilded song. I long to kiss the hands of this submission. I dream we crash into each other, Cain Abel, Cain Abel, Cain Abel, that even when you catch me and close the door, I fever for the taste of you. I said I have a problem. I didn't say I wanted to be saved. And then I'm going to read a few from the book. I'm going to read the first one that Rita Mae mentioned in her very generous introduction. What's to say about my chapbook? A lot of the chapbook is about my father, about the body, about sex, about immigration and water and all these kinds of things, which is like a lot to put in a chapbook, I'll be honest. But I felt it felt like a right impulse. The first poem in the chapbook is the oldest, I think, and then the last poem is the newest. I wrote it 2 days before my editor was like, all right, Idiola, that's enough. Give me the damn book. You've edited too much. Unfortunately, I'm going to become that kind of writer when I have a full length. I'm sorry to my future editor in advance. Okay. A field, any field. Lily, I haven't wanted my body or any of its carnivorous desire because you tried to stretch me into another night while I slept. I trusted you despite the blood in your mouth. I believe you meant me no harm, yet violence was the first way you learned to hold anything. Still as dusk, every time my body stretches back into a wet horizon, to moan the night into a clean opening, I am repulsed by the language my legs and mouth and all my openings render me into. I want to open the body into a new language, and so I return. Why do any of us return to that which has promised to slaughter us? We met each other in an empty field of this night, our deliberate brief wait, and I didn't offer myself as sacrifice or offer myself as anything. The night made us both ravenous, both tender raptures, both humble mouths that asked to be absolved of our merciless hunger. It was not me pulling my body around. It was not me parting my body to fit around you. It was not you pulling me apart until a new kingdom is erected in your name. What I mean to say is this. Some of us fuck because we want a story to tell, because we want something more beautiful than us to choose us. So much of your intimate life has been devoted to what war you pull out of yourself to level another landscape. How many times have you had to prove to yourself you were not prey, but what thrashes in the night and keeps blood awake, you who is too strong or too proud to acquiesce, to know the splendor of becoming undone, to say I was night and the field was inside me, lush and green and bashful as our hands, a healing that delivers us to and away from ourselves. The story is not about you taking this repulsion from me, but about a yearning which both opened and nearly killed me. I do not know why I want you with an unending thirst. Maybe it is the fuck the me I desire in you. Come, let us negotiate the space between wet folds in a night that promises us no return to what we once were. Let us both to one another be prey. Let me read. Yeah, I'll just make a handful more, and then I'm excited to talk to you all about your processes. Queer American. I have sex with men but make love to women. I only wish to fuck men who also desire to be fucked by men. In the dream, I make love to Lorraine Hansberry in a rose garden. I make straight men bow to the god of pussy. I part her legs and kiss each faded bruise between her thighs. In the dark, I practice my kegels to remind men who was fucking who. Every interview asks me the same question. What does it mean to be a queer American and Nigerian? Queer men take their internalized homophobia out on my naked body. I count tiles on the ceiling to keep from laughing. My mother says she understands switching to women because loving a man is hard. I haven't spoken to my father in months. I smoke, sometimes drink. He stops doing both after the stroke. I have his eyes. I used to believe joy, like other sources of light, was scarce. He knows nothing about me. There were things we were too embarrassed to say. All right, I'm gonna read 2 more, and then I'm excited to talk to y'all. My god uncle isn't here, but I always like to read his favorite poem in the chat book. I think it's like cute how like all my friends have like different favorite poems in the chat, which I think very much so hilariously gives them away. Can you speak Yoruba? I asked my father for the word thief in Yoruba. He says ole, says it also means lazy. Ask him for rain. He says ojo, for coward. It's been said you begin to master a language when you dream in it. I asked my father if his mother visits his sleep, searching the dark with his face for her hands. Faithful as nightfall, my father doesn't answer. Calls me buruku, a word he won't translate, but I know is a rebuke by the way it undoes my name. So I slip the word heavy as a shot shell into my mouth. There are other ways to spell silence. A faceless hunter moves towards a black fawn. Snow renames the landscape, but there isn't a word for snow in Yoruba. Language retreats where it isn't felt. A buckshot rings its bells to the sky. A herd of deer scatter the day's remains and are chased by their panic into the night. I asked my father how to say yes in Yoruba. He says Benny, but that it also translates to it is so. The hunter moves as the fawn moves, through the enclosure of trees, taking aim between the eyes, my bleeding skull knighted to the floor. Forgive the tongue that flexes towards what it knows best. Ojo, ojo. I kept saying coward when I meant to say rain. I'm just gonna read this last one. I never read this poem last in a reading, but I feel it I feel in the wake of our political climate, it feels apt. I wrote this poem the week Donald Trump got elected. It has nothing to do with Trump necessarily though, but I think the tense political climate greatly shaped what this poem turned into. Self-portrait as the Black girl becoming the beast everyone thought she was. The moon is my first emotion, then beast, then happy rage depending on a zealous appetite. I pull bobby pins from the kitchen of my scalp, tear out nails one by one, pluck out the lashes, yank docile teeth, fold the skin back by the mouth. I release my human flesh and night drops. Blue wolves circle the block in acute madness, dreaming in gun smoke and new names to pick their fangs clean. The moon sways blood and voices behind yellow eyes. Each of the names bow inside me. I grin, and the moon is an anxious pulse. I, a hungry one. In overexposure, the moon could make anything feral. I only eat a macabre light, and the night is so sweet on my tongue. Fear makes the blue wolves multiply. The moon rummages through the light of my name like a vagrant beggar, tills the blood in my four-legged body. Born non-white and woman call the thing what it is, hostile, uppity, neck rolls, hips without the logic, mean mugs, vengeful at the root. But you've only known my mercy, a snatched tongue, polite hands, crossed legs, a settled throat, plea and please, two hands on the same body, never my unhinged joy. In my first language, the cease of blood before writhing, knuckling of bone and sinew, a blue neck caught inside a maw and how each muscle negotiates before severing. God of the faithful night, teach me to lose my mouth in reverie, to laugh in my predator's blood, to let it fill my belly, how it trickles through the floorboards of my teeth. Thank you.
That was incredible. What a fantastic reading. The three of you are amazing. So thank you so much for bringing your talents here and sharing tonight. Bravo. Give yourselves a round of applause. I mean, woo! So we'd like to take a little bit of time to take questions from the audience on Facebook or YouTube, if there are any out there. And if not, I definitely have questions. And if the readers would like to ask each other questions, the conversation after the reading, as good as the reading is often as good as the reading. So I'm very excited to hear what you all have to say. I would like to start out just asking Idiola a little bit about the switching between languages in her work, accommodating Yoruba and English in a single poem and throughout the collection. Like, how do you do that, especially when the cultural references that are attached to words get lost?
Mm-hmm.
How can you bring all of that into such a small space?
Thank you. First of all, I have to thank my language tutor, Tolu Akinwole, who was so like kind and gracious, especially teaching me, because Yoruba is a very tonal language and English is not. I often say that English lacks a sense of music the way that Yoruba doesn't. So it was hard for me at first, and I'm still learning how tones work, right? But I say that because the tone and the pitch changes the way a word can be said, right? The word ole has two different meanings depending on the tone, right? And I thought that was really fascinating, how English is not really double jointed that way. And I wanted to have a poem in which a word in Yoruba can be mentioned without it being italicized, and then also define itself as the language is moving through it, if that makes sense. And that was really important to me, to have a poem that was double multi-jointed, that moves between languages. But also it was a good way for me to create a bridge between my father and I. I often say to my mother that because English is not her first language, I have to move through two doors of translation for us to be able to reach each other, right? But I never thought about that sort of same thing with my father. And that's where the poem, Can You Speak Yoruba, really comes from initially. So it's hard, but it was really important for me to try my hand anyway at moving between multiple languages in this small length of this little book, which feels like a test drive, if you will, for what book 2 I hope will look like. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Idiola. Barrett, I was wondering particularly about how your essays so often resist the expected narrative, and just how much you're aware of that struggle as you're writing each essay. do you find yourself sort of approximating culturally and then saying, no, that's not what I meant, and going back? Do you feel like sometimes the culture starts to kind of predetermine your essay, and then you have to like really wrestle it back into what you mean and what you think the real meaning is?
Yeah, it's a good question. And thank you again, just for the honor of reading with these two incredible poets. This was just really a fantastic event, and I'm really thrilled to be here and to hear from y'all. So yeah, I guess the way I think about it is that a lot of the pieces begin as kind of journalistic assignments or vaguely understood journalistic assignments, that the phenomenon will be existing in the culture, that an editor will dispatch me to go try out some experience, be it a men's retreat, be it a disaster preparedness compound, be it a psychic community in upstate New York. And usually I won't take an assignment unless I can see the tether points where I'm implicated in a piece, where I feel like there's some sort of personal correspondence, like that I'm going to have to be working something out for myself while on the journey. And so I find that the essay is really a way for me to think about, well, what does this mean just at the level of concepts, but then also what does it mean personally? So the process is always, it feels like peeling back layers, like just kind of going deeper and going into the harder place. I'm just kind of trying to push myself into places where I'm being made to reckon with something. And that usually that's an effort to kind of triangulate the subject of my piece, myself, and the reader. Like if I'm implicated in the piece, then hopefully it clears the way for the reader to be implicated as well. And then we're having a different kind of conversation than opposed to me just, expressing something that happened to me, or pointing and sneering at something silly in the culture. Something like that. Yeah.
I love that, talking about the tether points in yourself and wrestling with that.
Thanks.
T, I was wondering, this is your third chapbook coming up, which is fantastic and so exciting. And I was just reading Donald Hall's essay on poetry, sort of as a metaphor of as a secret room in a house. And he talked about, if you're reading poetry with your eyes, you're sort of reading it wrong. You're reading it like an instruction manual, or like you would read anything else. And poetry should be read with the body. And I really feel like you were so great at that. Like you make somebody really, even more when you get the pleasure of seeing you read. But just even reading the words on the page, like it feels like a very embodied experience. So I'm just wondering, has that changed over the course of the 3 chapbooks, or like, how did you develop that skill?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. Thank you, Rita. First, I would just like to say I'm still like breathless and speechless from hearing Barrett read and IS, like, wow, just kind of fanboying here. Yes, you all are like ridiculously talented, and I'm honored to be on the same platform. Embodied, yeah, I really don't know how else to write without just kind of bearing it all. I think, like maybe most writers, I don't know, maybe some of us may have gone through some level of bullying or awkwardness, or felt like we just could not say, or it was not safe to say how we felt. And I just always ran to my notebook. And I feel like how it's changed, well, since I can remember writing, but specifically over these last 3 chapbooks, is that I'm trying to be more honest with myself. And I come from a background of like slam poetry, which is like I feel like a lot of, or used to be just like a lot of just like get to the punchline and how like just how much can you punch and flashy at times. And I feel like the page is so vulnerable. And I feel like I just can't lie. So yeah, I think with this third chapbook, I just try to go like a step further beyond surface, beyond what's so rehearsed. And yeah, thank you for the question.
Yeah, it's just such a pleasure to hear you all read tonight. Just incredible. So do you have questions for each other? I know that you are appreciating each other so much, and you're getting a lot of appreciation on Facebook and YouTube, claps and hearts, and people are excited. But I was wondering, like, did questions come up for you as you're listening to each other?
I have a question for Barrett. Barrett, I'm a fan. You're amazing. Wow. You know, I really. Oh, one more time.
I said just thank you so much. That's a really honor. It's an honor.
A question I had for you is that when you're putting together a collection of essays, I know a lot of them came from your previously published works. My question is, how do you put together? This is someone who used to write long form too. I used to also be a music journalist. But the idea of putting my long form pieces into a collection, and not just like your greatest hits next to each other, like a cohesive body that's telling a single story through many different short forms of the essay. How do you put together a collection where it isn't just a compilation of all your greatest hits, but rather it's an actual essay collection, as in one single essay is connected to another, that's connected to another, which is creating an entire book?
Yeah, I think there's always a danger, particularly as an essayist, of creating a kind of miscellany. And you know, there are essay collections that do function in that way that I still would, you know, grab if there were a fire in my house, that I think are marvelous, you know. But for me, I didn't really know that I was writing a book, I would say, until I was about 60% of the way done with the pieces that were already published. And it occurred to me that as is the case, I think when you're writing an individual piece, you start to have recurring motifs, or you notice sort of intellectual obsessions, right? Or the question keeps coming up, right? And I just saw kind of across the essays that I was writing this question of narrative breakdown, like this kind of like older sense of like the postmodern breakdown, and how truth and our consensus reality was falling apart, and how there were a lot of harebrained surrogate narratives in the culture, and people were taking up these different sort of ideological solutions. And because so many magazines were kind of commissioning me to write about some of these, then I was like, oh yeah, this is a kind of weird mosaic of some of the sort of dormant ideologies in the country right now. So then at that point, it was just kind of, at that point, it was just kind of taking it to its natural conclusion, I guess, or just like seeking out pieces that would kind of reinforce some of those questions, I think. But that's actually kind of what I want to ask you in thinking about like a chapbook, and then moving from a chapbook into a full-length book. Like, how are you thinking about that transition?
Yeah, it's the chapbook. I think for some folks, they write the chapbook first and then think about the full length. I did not know I was ever going to write a chapbook. My full length Blood Mercy is way older than this little book here, and a lot of the poems that are in this chapbook are technically older than this book itself, which is like really weird. Like the first poem, "A Field on Your Field," is one of the oldest poems in the chapbook, and I just wrote it in passing. I didn't think about it. And then when I was putting together the chapbook, I was like, oh snap, wait, I think these poems are all trying to like come together and do something together. I think different folks have different philosophies about how a chapbook is meant to function. I'm really super into the idea of a chapbook being a self-contained little universe. And it's just that way. And it might have some connective tissue to a full length, but all in all, they are separate entities that may share overlapping themes. And I say that because I really am invested, maybe enamored for lack of a better term, with the idea of challenging myself to write all new pieces for a new collection. Again, I only speak for myself, but I like the idea of the chapbook being ephemeral. My chapbook is a limited run edition. I get 2 prints and then it's done. And I like the idea of it being finite in the world. My god uncle and I have fought quite a bit about it, and he vehemently disagrees, but he is old and bald, so I'm gonna show him this later after we're done here. Yeah, so I put together this little collection, and there were some poems I had to write, like I said before, to fill in the gaps. The last 2 poems in this book I had to write a month before it was due to my editor. And I was kind of like, all right, okay, quickly. And then I had some time to go back and edit it. And then my editor and I worked together on it. And I'm very fortunate to have a press that gave me so much time to work on this little book and make it as good as it could be, because a lot of chapbook presses don't give you that kind of time or space, because they're like really want to like move the process along, quickly get out a product to sell. But my press is equally invested in my happiness, me feeling like I wrote a book I'm very proud of, but then also, of course, obviously selling a product. This chapbook, like I said before, will closely resemble book 2 as opposed to the one that I'm working on right now. So I would do this terrible thing that like I would write my first book, and then when I was like exhausted by this, I would jump over and write my second book. And the poems that ended up here are kind of a vestigial organ, so to speak, of those poems that I would write every day on the train, where I would challenge myself to write at least 1 poem a day. I scrapped most of them. A lot of them did end up in this little book. I hope that answers your question.
I just want to say too, like, I love the idea of chapbooks as an ephemeral thing. A lot of chapbooks, though, people don't take as much time and care. Like, this is a gorgeous little chapbook. Like, they've done a great job with it. Not only is the content inside beautiful, but they've done a beautiful job presenting it. So
yeah,
kudos to the press for sure.
Yeah, my press did such an incredible job. When I first held it, I almost couldn't believe how beautiful it was. Also, special shout out to our in-house designer, LK James. She created this cover a few days after she was pregnant. Like, she had a whole baby, and then like she was in the office the next day drafting up my cover, and I was like, whoa, okay, I need to send her a gift basket, because wow, what a feat to do both of those things so close next to each other. I don't know anything about raising babies, but that sounds hard. But I think it also is really important. I mean, all of you know this more than I do, because I just got here. I only have a chapbook to my name. But you know, you write this great thing, or you write this small thing, and you hope that a press will be gracious enough to pick it up. And it really makes a difference to have a press that is on your team, right? As opposed to maybe a press that you might have to be at odds with. And I feel that the way that my chapbook came into the world, it have a press that's so like, it was so enthusiastic and loving about how they put everything together.
Yeah, I do feel like some presses it's sort of an assembly line thing, and like they don't give you that time to make sure it's exactly what you want to have out in the world, and they don't take the care with it that you would hope for. So yeah, I think you found a great press, and I'm very pleased for you. Are there more questions from the readers for each other?
Oh, I think it's interesting that you all are like, you know, through bigger presses. I self-published, so I kind of feel like I'm gonna go that way, just because I really like the autonomy that I have over my work. I like the ability of changing it, especially like my first chapbook and my second one left. I've changed poems in there because my analysis grew, my understanding of the world grew, and I didn't really want to have to fight anyone like on that. I feel like it's kind of like a living work. So it's really interesting to hear you all's experience, you know, with bigger presses and just like the processes. So thank you for illuminating that.
Well, T, I have a question for you, by the way. I know that a lot of your work is also pushing up against ableism and how that can affect a person who's an artist and what have you. My question is, do you think that slam poetry, poetry and performance, maybe as an organization, do you believe that it makes enough accommodations for folks with disabilities? Do you feel that slam poetry best belongs to people with disabilities?
I feel like slam poetry, I mean, if when I'm talking about slam poetry, I'm talking about poetry that's going to be judged, that's going through bouts and things like that. Which most would say that spoken word, people are doing spoken word, right? And so I call myself a spoken word artist, and I'm trying to put that form on the page. So about it being accessible, because I think that's what we're like talking about. I feel like it's up to the organizations and the organizers that put it on if they're going to head up like accessibility, if they're going to be mindful of ways in which performers or competitors can interact. And I think about also like all of the ways in which one is prepared for these rounds, like how to get there, how long is it? I also think about outside of just like the main mechanics that we think about, like, is the transportation there? Is there ASL? Is there captions? When I think of accessibility, I also think about the room and range for different voices to like be heard and honored and respected and amplified. And again, I think that all goes down to like the organizers and think and like kind of like their mission. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, it is 8:26, it looks like. But I would like to hear, if you don't have more questions for each other, just a little bit about one or two writers that inspired each of you. Barrett, you mentioned like the book that you would grab if your house were on fire, or the books. I imagine you with, a ton of books you're carrying out with the house on fire. But I would just like, if you only get to have one or two, what each of you might choose.
Barrett, it's funny that you say that, because in my last apartment in Brooklyn, I had a small box that says, "In case of fire, grab these books." And I put it on the box just in case. I was like, all right, quickly. The other ones, I can't replace these books.
Totally.
Poets that really inspire me. I've been reading a lot of Kiki Petrosino, specifically her book, Hymn for the Black Terrific, which is her second collection of poems. Oh, the book is so good. And I've also been, I feel like every season, especially during winter, I'm rereading Sappho and Richard Siken for the 100th time. I think there's just a way in which Richard Siken makes these sort of wild leaps between lines, and the way the logic moves and negotiates the lines in his poems, like continuously. I keep reading his poems and I'm like, how the fuck does he do it? It's crazy. And I just feel like without meaning to, I just kind of like sit at the foot of his lectern or something, just like listening to everything he has to say, everything he has to teach me. I love Richard Siken as a writer, and I never want to meet him in this lifetime. I'm perfectly fine with that.
Been wise.
I think about something that Barrett was kind of talking about earlier, and the point escapes me, but I'll give you the two poets. Both of these poets I went to school with at UW-Madison, and both of them happened to be a part of the first wave community that I was a part of. And the two books that I will never, like, I cannot leave the house without, if the house burned down, I got to take them, is one by Tahira Nurse. She got a book called Some Girls Survive on Their Sorcery Alone. If you have not heard Tahira Nurse, this woman, Black woman, Like her poetry is phenomenal on stage as much as it is on the page. So yeah. And then second poet that I just am like enamored with and have had the pleasure of working with so many times. Their name is Sean Avery Medlin, and they just had a book they released called 808s in Other Worlds. And if you haven't had a chance to get their book, please get that 808s and Other Worlds. Those two artists, my life. Yeah.
Those are so great. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many things that I would grab if there were a fire. Probably, I mean, Joan Didion, you know, with her recent passing too, she's always been bedrock for me. So, but I've been kind of going back and looking at some of the, yes, totally, some of the deeper cuts in her work, and everything just sings. And then James Baldwin, Notes from a Native Son. And particularly, I always think about, you were asking earlier, like how I think about structuring my essays. He's got a line that great art should reveal the questions that the answers obscure. And I always think about how his essays operated in that way, kind of pulling back, and that they were always revelations in some sense. And I think I'm thinking about his procedure often. And then too, because I can't not say Stanley Cavell. Stanley Cavell's The Senses of Walden, which is a beautiful book about a book that I'm not a huge fan of. It's about Henry David Thoreau's Walden, which I don't care for, but Stanley Cavell's book about it is beautiful. It recuperates the Thoreau for me, which is it's something. It's really something.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much for this wonderful reading and leading to other works. Fantastic. I hope to see you all again soon, and keep us posted on your work and what's up next. And I hope we can have you back one day soon. All right. Take good care.
Thank you so much, y'all. Good to see you.
Good night.